Why are we here? As Christians, what is it we are supposed to be doing? What is our purpose within the world? Are we just supposed to somehow survive in this world until we get to heaven? Or does God have some expectations for us to accomplish while we're here? Are there some tasks, some duties, some mission we're supposed to be achieving while we're here? Well, the Bible makes it very clear that we are, in fact, supposed to be accomplishing some things. We're going to look very briefly at a few of those, and then we're going to slow down a little bit and look at one that I just don't hear talked about much at all. Let's quickly look at a handful of the things that we as Christians are supposed to be doing. These will be familiar. But just because we know them, however, doesn't necessarily mean we'll be effective at accomplishing them. But it all starts with at least knowing them. We'll start with some advice from Solomon. Late in his adventurous life, he wrote this: "The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil." Well, there you go. Solomon says the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep his commandments, and that we'll be judged on how well we do that. Speaking of judgment, in the New Testament, we see Jesus talking about that day, Judgment Day, and explaining to people that he'll separate the sheep from the goats, and that the sheep that will be saved will include those who fed the hungry, cared for the sick, clothed the naked, visited those in prison. That's in Matthew 25, if you want to look it up and read it. So once again, we see some things that Christians are supposed to be doing. James wrote something very similar when he says, "Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world." He reiterates Jesus' point about caring for those in need. And then he adds that we're also to keep ourselves unstained from the world. James repeats this idea a couple chapters later when he says we are to resist the devil. And Paul echoes this thought when he tells the saints in Rome to abhor what is evil. And he tells the saints in Thessalonica to abstain from every form of evil. So clearly this staying away from evil is another expectation for us as Christians. And of course, Jesus is recorded in the Gospel of Luke saying that he came to seek and save the lost. And the Gospel of Matthew records that we are to do the same thing when Jesus says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you." Another task that we as Christians are charged with accomplishing. In summary so far, obey the commands of God, take care of the needy and less fortunate, stay away from evil, and make disciples. Most of us are very familiar with these. They are a part of our doctrine, a part of our collective history, a part of our church culture, if you will. But there's another expectation that's clearly stated in the Bible, but for some reason gets much less attention, much less airtime from our pulpits or in our classrooms. But it's in the Bible, just like the ones we already mentioned. Some of you are thinking, oh, I know what it is. I know what you left out. Go to church. We're supposed to go to church. After all, Hebrews says not to forsake the assembling of the saints. Well, that is something we do, and we could certainly add that to the list. But that's not one of the things that doesn't get talked about much. Just the opposite. It gets talked about all the time. So what is this other thing we're supposed to be doing that doesn't get talked about much? Let's just open our Bibles and read about it. 1 John 3:8 says, "Whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil, For the devil has been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. That's pretty fascinating. And to be honest, that's not a verse I ever remember hearing a sermon about or in a Bible class. Perhaps that's because that only applies to Jesus, but not us. Is that the case? Let's keep reading. Ephesians 5:11 says, "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them." Well, that sounds a bit more like the 1 John passage we just looked at. Maybe we do have some responsibility when it comes to evil in the world. Again, let's keep reading. In Romans 12:21, Paul tells his fellow saints in Rome, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Well, that makes it pretty clear. We do have a responsibility when it comes to evil. We're supposed to overcome it. And that sounds a lot like Jesus' purpose, destroying the works of the devil. And look, that only makes sense. If we're going to claim to be Christ-like, then we ought to be doing the same things and having the same purpose that Jesus did. So what does destroying the works of the devil look like? What does overcoming evil with good look like? Well, I suppose it can and does take on many forms, but I'm convinced that sitting in a church building, listening to a sermon, singing a few songs, listening to a couple of minute-and-a-half long prayers ain't going to get the job done. Exactly what evil would be overcome sitting in an auditorium with a bunch of fellow Christians. If we think the best place to overcome evil and destroy the works of the devil is in our church assemblies, that doesn't speak too well of our church assemblies, does it? To the frustration of some, I'm not going to lay out some 3 or 4-step process to overcome evil with good, to destroy the works of the devil. Rather, I'm going to encourage you to seek God's help, to ask Him to help you see the evil that's around us in the world, and to ask Him to give you the wisdom and willingness and courage to expose it and overcome it. It is, after all, one of the duties for those of us who call ourselves Christians. A duty that, it seems to me anyway, that we've been ignoring or avoiding. And yes, that includes me. Trust me, I'm preaching to the choir today. With God, all things are possible. That includes destroying the works of the devil. May we seek God's help and do what He's called us to do. Thanks for listening. God bless you on your journey.